The Alpha King saw the Omega Maid heal his cursed son, and his wolf claimed her. The castle of Eloria rose like a shadow from the misted mountains, its black stone walls glinting under the cold moonlight. Inside, the corridors echoed with silence, broken only by the distant howl of the Alpha King's wolf, a creature of immense size and spectral eyes. The king, Valerius, stood alone in the throne room, his tall figure cloaked in darkness, staring at the chamber beyond where his son lay. The prince, barely 10, was pale and fragile, his breath shallow and uneven. For months, a curse had gripped him, leaving him with ghostly marks on his skin and a shadow that clung to his very soul. No healer, no mage, and no potion had been able to touch the dark magic that bound him. Valerius had tried everything, yet hope dwindled each passing day. A quiet knock echoed through the throne room. The king's eyes, cold and piercing, turned toward the heavy doors. "Enter," he commanded, voice deep and firm. The doors opened slowly, revealing a young maid from the village, carrying a simple wooden box filled with herbs and oils. She was small, her brown hair tied neatly, her green eyes steady despite the imposing darkness of the castle. Her presence seemed almost fragile against the towering walls, yet there was an aura about her, a quiet strength that drew the king's attention. "I am Ileana," she said softly, bowing her head. "I have heard of the prince's suffering. I wish to help." Valerius, lips pressed into a thin line. He did not trust outsiders, and especially not someone so young, someone so human. Yet something in her voice stirred a curiosity he had not felt in years. "Many have come before you," he said, voice heavy with warning. "All have failed." "I do not promise miracles, my lord," Ileana replied, meeting his gaze without fear. "But I can ease his pain and perhaps awaken what the curse hides." The king studied her for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "You may try, but understand this. Should you fail, this castle will not protect you." Ileana swallowed her fear but did not show it. She stepped forward, letting the wolf outside the throne room sniff at her as she passed. The creature's glowing eyes followed her every move, and she felt an odd pull, as if the wolf itself were assessing her heart. She did not flinch. In the chamber where the prince lay, shadows twisted and danced across the walls. The boy's small chest rose and fell weakly. Ileana knelt beside him, opening her wooden box and arranging the herbs in a circle around his bed. She murmured words of old magic, calling upon the gentle spirits of the forest and the light of the moon that shone through the narrow window. As she worked, the boy stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open. A faint glow surrounded him, a shimmer of warmth that had not been there for months. The shadows seemed to recoil at her presence, as if afraid of the life she brought with her hands. Valerius watched from the doorway, his arms crossed, the hard set of his jaw betraying the tension in his chest. He did not speak, but inside, a strange hope took root. Could this simple maid from the village, this fragile human, be the one to touch what no king or mage could? Hours passed, the ritual continuing in silence. Ileana moved with care, her hands brushing the boy's skin with gentle precision. She whispered soothing words, calling upon her own hidden strength, the magic she had always known but never fully understood. And slowly the prince's breathing grew steady. Color returned to his cheeks, faint but undeniable. Suddenly, the wolf outside let out a low growl, eyes blazing with unspoken emotion. Ileana looked up, sensing the creature's presence in a way she could not explain. It was as though the wolf were alive with recognition, drawn to her not as prey nor as stranger, but as something claimed. Valerius noticed it too. His wolf rarely showed such reaction to any human, not even to the court or to visiting nobles. His brows furrowed as he studied Ileana and the creature. Something had shifted, some ancient bond awakened by her touch. The prince opened his eyes fully now, blinking at Ileana with a mixture of fear and recognition. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I am Ileana," she said softly, smiling. "I have come to help you." The boy's small hand reached for hers instinctively, and as it touched her palm, a spark seemed to pass between them. Light, warmth, and life surged, pushing back the dark tendrils of the curse. The wolf outside howled, a mournful yet triumphant sound echoing through the stone halls. Valerius felt a strange unease in his chest, a pull he could not name. This maid, this girl who dared to kneel before his son, had stirred something in him that was more than curiosity. It was something deeper, more primal. He clenched his fists, struggling to maintain control, yet a shiver ran down his spine. The shadows around the prince flickered and wavered. The boy gasped, then coughed, finally taking a deep, unbroken breath. Ileana's eyes glistened with relief. She had succeeded, at least for now. Valerius stepped forward, his presence commanding. "Enough," he said, voice like iron. "The ritual is over, step back." Ileana nodded, rising to her feet. As she did, she felt the wolf brush against her legs. Its presence was overwhelming, protective, almost possessive. She did not pull away, though a quiet fear settled in her chest. She had never experienced anything like this before, a bond so sudden, so undeniable. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. "Your power, it is not ordinary," he said. "Tell me, maid, from where comes your strength?" Ileana shook her head. "I only know what I can do. I follow the old ways, the ways of healing, of balance." "Old ways," Valerius murmured, his voice dark with thought. "Perhaps more powerful than I believed." He studied her carefully, and Ileana met his gaze, unflinching. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then the wolf let out another low growl, pressing closer to Ileana. She felt the heat of its body, the sharp awareness of its presence, and a strange understanding passed between them. The wolf had chosen her, not by command, not by accident, but by some ancient, instinctive law. Valerius' heart clenched. He had ruled the kingdom for years with strength and fear, but never had he seen the wolf act this way. And never had he felt the stirring in his own soul, the pull towards someone he was supposed to control but could not. The prince, now seated on the edge of his bed, looked up at the maid with gratitude and awe. "You saved me," he whispered. Ileana knelt again, brushing a lock of hair from his pale forehead. "You are strong," she said gently. "The curse may try to hold you, but it is not stronger than your heart." As the night deepened, the wolf padded closer to Ileana, its golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. It rested its massive head on her lap, and for the first time she felt a surge of calm and belonging. She realized with both fear and wonder that the wolf had claimed her, and with it, a connection to the Alpha King himself, a connection that neither of them fully understood yet. Valerius stood in the doorway, silent, watching the scene unfold. His pulse was quickened, though he refused to admit it. The castle, the prince, the curse, all of it was intertwined with this maid now, and the wolf's choice was a statement he could not ignore. Suddenly, a distant, eerie howl echoed through the mountains, chilling the night air. The shadows in the corners of the chamber flickered unnaturally, as if stirred by unseen hands. Ileana's eyes widened, sensing danger on the horizon. She rose, wolf still at her side, ready to face whatever was coming. Valerius moved closer, his cape trailing behind him, his voice barely a whisper. "You are claimed by the wolf," he said, "and perhaps in some way by me, but beware, maid, nothing here is as simple as it seems." Ileana met his gaze, feeling both fear and determination. "I do not yet understand, my lord," she said, "but I will do whatever is needed to save your son." The wolf lifted its head, letting out a single, low howl that shook the castle walls. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, casting strange shadows on the floor. And in that instant, Ileana knew that her life had changed forever. As the moonlight touched the stone towers of Eloria, a cold wind swept through the halls. Outside, the forest seemed alive, watching, waiting. The maid and the wolf, bound by an invisible thread, stood together. The Alpha King, silent and brooding, realized that nothing in his world would ever be the same again. And then, without warning, The wolf vanished from sight, leaving only a faint glow on the floor where it had rested. Ileana shivered, sensing that the bond had not ended, it had only begun. The castle doors slammed shut behind her as she turned to check on the prince. A shadow moved across the room, unseen yet felt, and a voice whispered on the wind. "The night is only beginning, and your fate is bound to the wolves." The castle of Eloria was quieter now, but the silence carried a weight heavier than stone. Shadows lingered in the corners, flickering as though whispering secrets of the past. Ileana moved cautiously through the halls, her hands still tingling from the wolf's touch the night before. The prince slept peacefully in his chamber, the curse loosened but not yet gone. Valerius followed behind her at a distance, silent as a shadow, his sharp eyes tracing every step she took. He could not deny the strange pull he felt toward her, a mixture of curiosity, caution, and a stirring in his heart he had long suppressed. "You move as if you belong here," he said finally, voice low and measured, breaking the tense quiet. Ileana glanced at him but did not stop. "I only follow where I am needed, my lord," she replied. Her voice was calm, though her pulse raced. "The prince's safety comes first." Valerius' gaze lingered on her, noting the quiet strength in her posture. She was not like other humans who trembled before him. She carried herself with confidence and serenity, a rare combination that unnerved him as much as it intrigued him. The wolf, which had vanished after the healing ritual, suddenly appeared at the end of the hallway. Its eyes glowed faintly, golden in the dim torchlight, and it walked alongside Ileana as if guiding her. Valeria stopped, recognizing the silent message in the creature's presence. The wolf had claimed her, and it expected him to acknowledge it. "You are bonded to it," Valeria said, his tone more observation than accusation. "And by extension, you are tied to this castle, to my family." Ileana's lips pressed together. "I do not yet understand what it means, only that I am drawn to the wolf and to the prince." The king's brows knitted. He wanted to speak, to demand, to assert control, yet the weight of truth made him pause. The maid was no ordinary healer. She had powers he could not measure, and her presence stirred something ancient, something deep in his blood and bones. Later that day, Ileana tended the prince again. His eyes, once dull and shadowed, now held a faint spark. He smiled weakly at her as she applied soothing ointments to his skin. "I feel lighter," he whispered. "It's like something inside me is waking." "You are stronger than you know," Ileana said gently. "The curse can only hold you if you fear it. You must trust yourself and trust me." The prince nodded slowly. "I will." But outside the castle, the wind carried whispers of danger. The forest around Eloria rustled unnaturally, and the shadows seemed to move with intent. Ileana felt it before anyone else, the presence of someone or something watching, waiting. Her hands clenched instinctively, though she did not speak of it yet. Valerius, too, felt the shift. The hair on his neck rose, and the wolf at his side growled low, a warning that something approached. For the first time in years, the Alpha King felt a flicker of unease that was not tied to politics or enemies. Something darker stirred. That evening, Valerius summoned Ileana to the tower chamber, where moonlight streamed through tall windows. The wolf sat silently behind her, a guardian watching over both of them. The king's eyes, usually stern and unyielding, softened as he spoke. "You healed him," he said simply, nodding toward the prince's room. "No one else could." "How?" Ileana bowed her head slightly. "I follow the old ways. I use what I can, what the spirits of the earth and moon allow. But it is not only my power. The prince's heart, it responds. Magic, I have learned, only awakens when it is invited." Valeria studied her closely. She was honest, yet her words hinted at more than she revealed. He sensed that she carried a strength she did not fully understand, a power that could shift the balance of his kingdom. "You are unlike anyone I have known," he said finally. His voice was quieter now, almost a murmur. "And yet you stand here without fear, with the wolf beside you as if it were your own." Ileana felt the wolf shift slightly, its glowing eyes meeting hers, acknowledging the bond. She swallowed, aware of the weight of the moment. "I am tied to it," she admitted softly, "and perhaps to you in ways I cannot name yet." Valerius felt a pulse in his chest, a strange warmth mingled with tension. He wanted to reach out to test the bond, yet restraint held him. There were rules, and as Alpha he had always enforced them. But Ileana was different, unpredictable, powerful, and unbound by fear. Before either could speak further, the castle doors rattled with a violent force. The torches flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. Ileana's hand went instinctively to the wolf, which growled, low and warning. "Who goes there?" Valerius demanded, stepping forward, his cloak sweeping behind him. A figure emerged from the darkness outside the main gate. It was cloaked and hooded, the air around it thick with shadow. Ileana felt a chill as a wave of dark magic rolled through the chamber, brushing against her like icy fingers. The wolf leapt forward, placing itself between the intruder and the pair. Its growl was fierce, primal, a sound that vibrated through stone walls. The hooded figure stopped at the edge of the torchlight, its presence commanding attention. Valerius' eyes narrowed. "You bring trouble," he said, voice sharp. "Speak." The figure lifted its head slowly, revealing a mask of shadow that obscured its features. "The boy's curse, it stirs beyond these walls," it said, voice like wind through dead trees. "The healer is chosen. The wolf has made its claim. The time of reckoning approaches." Ileana's heart raced. She did not fully understand the words, but instinctively she knew they were a warning. Danger was coming, more than she had faced before, and it was tied to the prince, to the wolf, and to her own newfound power. Valerius' hand went to the hilt of his sword. "Leave now," he commanded, "or face the consequences." The figure's shadow seemed to grow, stretching along the floor and walls. Then, without another word, it vanished, leaving a cold emptiness in its wake. The torches flickered, and the wolf lowered its head, eyes glowing faintly as if sensing the lingering threat. Ileana exhaled slowly, her mind racing. "It is coming," she said softly. "Something dark, something that will test us all." Valerius remained silent, watching her. He did not often admit fear, but a seed of concern had taken root. The castle, the prince, and now this maid, everything was intertwined with forces beyond his control. And yet, he could not turn away from her, could not ignore the bond that had begun to form. The next days passed in careful routine. Ileana tended the prince with meticulous care, strengthening his body and spirit. The boy's laughter, faint but real, returned slowly, a light in the shadow of the castle. Each day, the wolf appeared more frequently by Ileana's side, its presence protective and unwavering. Valerius observed quietly, sometimes joining them in the evenings when the moonlight was soft. Their conversations were careful, layered with subtle tension and unspoken thoughts. He learned of her past, her life in the village, and the rare gift she carried. She learned of the curse, of the weight of kingship, and the loneliness that had hardened him into stone. In one such evening, the three sat near the window in the tallest tower, the prince between them, laughing softly at a story Ileana told. The wolf sat behind them, tail flicking, eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. Valerius watched the maid carefully, noting how naturally the boy clung to her, how the wolf responded to her presence. His own heart stirred uncomfortably, a mix of pride, longing, and fear. "You have brought life back to him," he said finally, voice low. "I do not know if I have seen such a thing in all my years." Ileana smiled faintly. "He is brave," she said. "The courage was always there. I only helped him find it." The wolf lifted its head, letting out a single, haunting howl that echoed through the castle. Ileana's hand instinctively touched the creature's fur, and in that moment, a wave of connection passed between them. She felt strength, protection, and a strange certainty that her path was now bound to this castle and its people. But as night fell, a shadow moved at the edge of the forest. Something watched, patient and silent, its dark energy growing stronger with each passing hour. Ileana sensed it even before anyone else, a whisper of danger that coiled around her like a snake. The prince slept peacefully, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond the walls. Valeria stood silently at the window, hand on the ledge, eyes narrowing as he felt the same unease. He knew their lives were about to change, and this time the darkness would not be easy to fight. Ileana pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the pulse of the wolf at her side, and whispered softly, "Whatever comes, we will face it together." Outside, the wind carried a howl that was not the wolf's, a sound that made the stones shiver and the shadows deepen. Something was coming to the castle, something old, dangerous, and relentless. And in the moonlight, the bond between the maid, the prince, and the Alpha King grew stronger, yet tinged with fear. For the night was not yet over, and the forces that moved in shadow would test their hearts, their courage, and their very souls. The castle of Eloria had not known such uneasy nights for decades. Shadows clung to the walls and corners like living things, whispering secrets that only the wolf seemed to understand. Ileana could feel the pulse of danger pressing against the castle gates, a dark rhythm that unsettled her bones. Though the prince slept peacefully, the threat looming outside was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. Valerius moved silently along the halls, his boots echoing softly against the cold stone. His eyes were sharp, scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. Yet even as he readied his guards and inspected the castle defenses, his mind lingered on Ileana. Her courage, her calm, her inexplicable strength. She was unlike anyone he had ever known. He had ruled through fear and power for years, yet in her presence he felt something foreign, something that stirred his heart as much as it tested his restraint. Ileana, meanwhile, moved among the castle chambers like a gentle wind. She tended to the prince, who now showed glimpses of energy and curiosity that the curse had long denied him. His small hand often reached for her as if he instinctively knew she was a protector, a beacon in the darkness that surrounded him. She smiled softly at him, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "You are stronger than the curse wants you to be," she whispered. "But strength is not only in magic, it is in courage, in trust, in the love that surrounds you." The prince blinked at her, eyes wide. "Do you love him?" he asked quietly, pointing to Valerius, who was leaning against the doorway, silent yet watchful. Ileana paused, feeling the tension tighten in her chest. I care for him," she admitted softly, careful with her words. "But my heart is also tied to this place, to this boy, and to the wolf that guards him." Valerius' ears twitched at the words, though he did not move. He remained silent, yet his mind spun with thoughts he had long suppressed. The idea that someone could care for him, not out of fear or duty, but out of something genuine, it unsettled him more than any enemy could. The wolf, sensing the tension, nudged Ileana gently, resting its massive head against her arm. Its golden eyes glimmered with loyalty and warning. The bond between them was undeniable, a tether of instinct and magic that linked the maid, the prince, the wolf, and even the king in ways they had yet to fully understand. That night, as the castle slept under the cold gaze of the moon, a shadow moved through the forest beyond the walls. It was no ordinary thief or assassin. It carried an aura of old magic, of curses older than the castle itself. Ileana felt it first, a prickling along her skin, a whisper in her mind that warned her of the danger. Valerius sensed it too. He had faced countless enemies, yet this presence felt different, ancient, patient, and cunning. He called a guard and quietly instructed them to secure the gates, but deep inside, he knew that the threat could not be held back by swords alone. In the tower, Ileana prepared herself, gathering herbs and drawing protective circles around the prince's chamber. Her hands moved with careful precision, her mind focusing on the magic that connected her to the boy, to the wolf, and unknowingly to the king. Each chant she whispered echoed in the room, pushing back the shadows and reinforcing the fragile light of life within the prince. Hours passed, the tension in the air thickening. Then, a sudden chill swept through the castle. The torch flames flickered violently, casting long, dancing shadows across the stone walls. Ileana's heart pounded as she felt a presence at the door, a dark figure moving silently, almost impossibly fast. Valerius appeared in the doorway, sword drawn, eyes blazing. "Show yourself," he commanded, voice sharp and commanding. The shadows swirled and a figure emerged. Cloaked and hooded, it radiated an aura of dark magic that made the hairs on Ileana's arms stand on end. Its voice, when it spoke, was like wind through dead trees. "The boy's life is fragile, and the maid is more than she knows. You cannot protect him forever, Alpha King." Valerius' grip on his sword tightened. "I will protect him, whatever it takes." The figure laughed softly, a sound that seemed to echo through the stone halls. "Protection comes at a price," it whispered, "and you, Alpha, may yet lose more than your crown. The curse is old, and it hungers for its full power to awaken." Ileana stepped forward, placing herself between the prince and the shadow. "You will not harm him," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her chest. "I will not allow it." The figure paused, considering her words. Then, with a wave of its hand, shadows surged across the floor, creeping toward the prince's chamber like living serpents. Ileana felt the surge of magic pressing against her, and instinctively she reached out, connecting with the wolf. Its presence flowed through her, strengthening her, grounding her. "Stand back," Valerius said, his voice firm. He stepped closer to her, placing a protective hand near her shoulder, not touching her, but a presence that reassured her and the prince alike. Ileana drew on every ounce of her strength, her magic weaving through the protective circle, fighting against the dark shadows. The wolf at her side growled, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through the castle, echoing off the stone walls and scattering some of the darkness. The figure recoiled slightly, a hiss escaping its lips. "You are stronger than I expected," it said. Then, as suddenly as it had arrived, it vanished into the night, leaving only a whisper of cold air in its wake. Ileana exhaled, her body trembling from the effort. The prince stirred, blinking up at her, his small hand reaching for hers. "Did it go away?" he asked. "Yes," Ileana said softly, "but we must remain vigilant. The curse is not yet gone and the darkness will return." Valerius watched her, awe and something deeper swirling in his eyes. He had always been a man of control, a ruler who trusted in strength and fear. Yet here was a maid, gentle and fearless, who had stood against a shadow that he would have feared to face alone. His chest tightened with an emotion he did not yet name. In the days that followed, the bond between Ileana and Valerius grew, though both maintained the careful tension of duty and pride. The king taught her about the history of the castle, the ancient magic that had once protected the royal line, and the origin of the prince's curse, a betrayal centuries old, woven into the bloodline like a shadow that refused to fade. Ileana listened, absorbing every detail, understanding that her own magic was now intertwined with theirs. She realized that she was not only a healer but a key, a living bridge between the prince, the king, and the wolf that had claimed her. One evening, the three of them sat in the moonlit tower chamber. The prince was laughing softly at a story Ileana told, his laughter a fragile melody that filled the room with warmth. The wolf sat behind them, ever watchful, its eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. Valerius watched Ileana carefully. "You have changed this castle," he said quietly, almost to himself. "The shadows do not frighten me as they once did, yet you—" His voice faltered, the words unfinished. Ileana turned to him, her green eyes meeting his. "I do not seek to frighten you, my lord," she said gently, "only to help in whatever way I can." The wolf lifted its head, letting out a low, haunting howl that seemed to shake the very walls. Ileana placed a hand on its fur, feeling the bond pulse between them. She knew in that moment that she could not turn back. She was bound to the castle, the prince, and the king in ways that went beyond simple magic. But the darkness was patient. Even as peace settled in the tower, Ileana sensed it, a shadow gathering beyond the forest, growing stronger with every passing hour. She pressed a hand to her chest, whispering a silent vow. "Whatever comes," she said softly, "we will face it together." Valerius' eyes softened, though he did not speak. The bond between them was no longer just one of duty. It was of trust, of shared purpose, and perhaps something more, something neither of them fully understood yet. Outside, the wind carried a strange, almost whispered howl, one that did not belong to the wolf. The shadows in the forest moved with intent, creeping closer to the castle. The night was far from over, and the forces that threatened them were awakening, ready to test every ounce of courage, every thread of magic, and every bond they had forged. And in the moonlight, as the wolf rested at Ileana's side and the prince slept, a quiet truth settled over the tower. Their fight was only beginning. The curse was not yet fully broken, the darkness not fully revealed, and the bond between Maid and King was about to face trials that could change the fate of Eloria forever. The night was alive with shadows. Outside the towering walls of Eloria, the forest whispered in a language older than the castle itself. A cold wind carried the scent of danger, thick with magic and malice, creeping closer to the stone gates. The prince slept in his chamber, peaceful for the first time in months, unaware that the darkness had returned, stronger and more cunning than before. Ileana stood at the top of the tallest tower, the wolf at her side, its massive form radiating power. Her hands trembled slightly, though her eyes were steady. She felt the pull of the magic in the forest, a force that wanted to undo everything she had fought to protect. She pressed a hand to the wolf's fur, drawing strength from the bond they shared. "We cannot let it reach him," she whispered, her voice firm despite the fear curling in her chest. The wolf growled low, a sound that shook the stone floor, and Ileana understood without words. She would not face this alone. The bond between them, forged in shadow and strengthened by the moonlight, was a tether that could channel her strength far beyond what she had known. From behind, a tall shadow approached. Valerius stepped into the tower, his armor glinting faintly in the moonlight. His eyes, sharp and commanding, softened as they fell on Ileana. "You are ready," he said, voice quiet but full of conviction. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Ileana turned to him, meeting his gaze. "I am, if you are by my side." A faint rumble shook the tower as the forest beyond the castle walls seemed to stir. The shadows moved, twisting into shapes darker than night, forming a figure that radiated a presence older than the kingdom itself. The dark sorcerer, the one who had cursed the prince decades ago, had arrived. His robes shimmered with shadow and his eyes glowed with malice. "You cannot stop what has begun," the sorcerer hissed, his voice echoing like wind through dead branches. "The curse will awaken fully, and the bloodline will be mine to command." Valerius stepped forward, placing himself between the sorcerer and Ileana. "This castle, my son, and my people will not fall to you," he said, voice strong and unwavering. The wolf leapt to the edge of the tower, growling, its eyes glowing like molten gold. Ileana felt the surge of power pass from it to her, strengthening her heart, her resolve, and her connection to the prince. She knew what she must do. The sorcerer raised his hands, and shadows surged toward the tower like living water. Ileana's hands glowed faintly, drawing on her magic, her voice chanting words older than memory. She focused on the prince, on his life, on the light of his spirit. The shadows lashed at her, and for a moment doubt flared. Could she truly hold this darkness at bay? Valerius, sword struck with precision, cutting through the shadow tendrils. Each strike resonated with the authority of a king, yet even he knew that this battle was not won with strength alone. Together, he and Ileana had to combine courage and magic to protect the prince and break the curse. The wolf leapt between them and the sorcerer, its massive form a living shield. Ileana reached out, her hands brushing the prince's chamber window, drawing on his latent magic, the life force that had stirred when she first healed him. Light surged from her palms, intertwining with the wolf's presence, wrapping around the sorcerer's shadows. The sorcerer screamed, a sound of frustration and fury, as the light and bond of Maid, King, and Wolf pushed back the darkness. He struck again, dark magic twisting into deadly shapes, but the wolf growled, louder and deeper, shaking the stone walls. Ileana closed her eyes, feeling every heartbeat in the castle, every breath of the prince, every pulse of the wolf. Their unity was more than magic. It was the strength of trust, courage, and love. "Now!" Valerius shouted, charging forward with the precision and skill of a king. His sword cut through the shadows, breaking the sorcerer's focus. Ileana released a final surge of energy, a radiant wave that wrapped around the sorcerer, binding him in pure light. The shadows shrieked, twisting into nothingness, leaving only the sorcerer trembling at the center of the tower. Ileana stepped forward, placing her hands over the sorcerer's chest, her voice calm and commanding. "You will harm no one. The curse is broken." The sorcerer's eyes widened, his power draining, and a low groan escaped him as the magic unraveled. The wolf barked once, sharp and clear, as if signaling victory. The prince stirred, his small eyes opening fully for the first time in months, light and laughter returning to his face. Valerius stepped beside Ileana, watching the sorcerer collapse into a heap of powerless shadows. Relief surged through him, though his gaze lingered on the maid, whose courage and power had saved not only the prince but the kingdom. The wolf, its eyes glowing softly now, pressed its massive head against Ileana's leg. She smiled, feeling the bond stronger than ever. She understood now what it meant to be chosen, not claimed by force, but by connection, loyalty, and trust. The prince sat up slowly, looking at Ileana and Valerius. "It's over, isn't it?" he asked. "For now," Ileana said softly, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "But courage and care will keep you safe." Valerius knelt beside them, placing a strong hand on the prince's shoulder. "And we will always be here," he said, his voice both commanding and gentle. "No shadow can take this from you." The wolf let out a final, triumphant howl, which echoed through the castle and forest alike. Ileana reached down, running her hands along its fur. "You were with me the entire time," she murmured. The wolf's eyes met hers, golden and unwavering, and it seemed to nod, acknowledging her choice. The bond was no longer a claim. It was a promise, forged in moonlight, strengthened in shadow, and sealed with courage. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, the castle seemed to breathe again. The shadows that had lingered for decades receded, and light filled the halls. The prince laughed, free of the curse's weight, running toward Ileana with unrestrained joy. Valerius stood at the window, watching them, a rare softness in his eyes. The bond he had once resisted now filled him with a quiet strength. He understood at last that leadership was not only wielded with sword or authority, but with trust, courage, and the willingness to embrace what is unexpected and true. Ileana knelt to greet the prince, laughing softly as he clung to her hands. "You are well now," she said, tears of relief in her eyes. "Yes," he said, smiling, "thanks to you and the wolf." Valerius moved closer, standing behind her, watching the two of them. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the depth of what had grown in his heart, not only for the maid who had healed his son, but for the bond they shared, tested in fire and shadow. Ileana turned, and their eyes met. In that glance, words were unnecessary. They had faced darkness, fear, and uncertainty together and emerged stronger. The bond between them, woven through courage, trust, and a hint of something deeper, was undeniable. Outside, the forest was calm, though the whispers of ancient magic remained in the wind. The wolf padded beside Ileana and Valerius, its presence a reminder that some bonds are eternal, beyond fear, beyond time. The prince sat between them, laughter and light returning to his small face. "Can we play outside?" he asked, eager and free. Ileana smiled, standing and holding his hands. "Yes, little prince, the world is yours again." Valerius watched them, silent yet full of emotion. He knelt beside Ileana, and for the first time in years he allowed himself a quiet, heartfelt smile. The darkness had come, and yet they had endured, bonded in ways stronger than any curse, any magic, or any shadow. The wolf lifted its head, eyes scanning the horizon one last time. Then slowly it sat back beside Ileana, a guardian and companion, silent but ever present. Ileana reached down, resting a hand on Valerius' shoulder. "Whatever comes next," she said softly, "we face it together. The bond we share is stronger than fear or shadow." Valerius nodded, his voice quiet but unwavering. "Together." And as the sun rose fully over the mountains, bathing the castle in golden light, the kingdom of Eloria breathed anew. The curse was broken. The prince was safe. The wolf had chosen well. And Ileana, the maid who had healed the boy, stood at the heart of it all, bound not by fate alone, but by courage, love, and a bond stronger than any shadow. Though the winds still whispered secrets of old magic, and though the shadows might return someday, one truth remained. They had faced the darkness and emerged, stronger together. The story of the maid, the Alpha King, the wolf, and the cursed prince had reached a new beginning, a life reborn in trust, courage, and enduring light.